distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Zarak Khan. I'm the Director of Programs and Initiatives at the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat. It's my distinct honor to be your moderator and your facilitator for this very important event this afternoon, Australia's high-level event on climate change. This is a very critical event for us, noting that as always, Australia gives the best coffees at the COPs, so I'm sure all of you have enjoyed that. But more importantly, Australia is a very important partner to the Pacific region when it comes to climate change. As you know, Australia is a big supporter of the Pacific Resilience Facility. They've given immense climate finance resources on mitigation and adaptation across the Pacific region. And we have a distinguished group of speakers this afternoon to talk about not just Australia's contribution, but also how we as a region can effectively advocate on the very important issues that we have at COP29 from a regional perspective. So without further ado, I'd like to very briefly introduce you to the Assistant Minister for Climate Change for Australia, Honourable Josh Wilson. I understand that the Minister is from Fremantle in Melbourne. He is a very passionate advocate for climate change issues in support of the Pacific region. I understand he's a former educator, a former legal expert, but also a passionate photographer as well. And so I'd like to now invite the Assistant Minister to the podium, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Zarak, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, COP colleagues and participants, but particularly leaders, ministers, and senior officials from the Pacific. It's really a privilege for me to be at an event again 2 nights in a row with a focus on the Pacific. I think that's entirely appropriate. I'll start off by saying to you, Kaya, which is how we say hello in the part of the world that I'm from, Fremantle in Western Australia, or Walyalup, the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people. Ladies and gentlemen, the Pacific has been one of the most forceful and the most persuasive voices on climate change for a long time. You've shaped the global debate with the authority and weight of your lived experience. The scale of the threat to the Pacific is not just a forecast, it's a reality that's being faced right now. And so there's both a compelling logic and frankly an obligation to listen to the Pacific, because Pacific nations are at the sharpest of sharp edges of the effects of climate change, having contributed the least to it. It's our responsibility, therefore, to reduce our emissions and to advocate that others, including the world's largest emitters, do the same. Australia certainly recognises our responsibility in addressing the climate crisis through our own clean energy transition by providing support to the Pacific. In the last 2 years, we've legislated a commitment to net zero. We've committed to 82% renewables by 2030. We've made a very significant investment in new renewable energy generation, storage, grid upgrades, and all of those things. We're also supporting the region's transition to renewable energy, increasing access to climate finance and sharing climate adaptation technology and experience. And Australia is absolutely committed to amplifying the voice of the Pacific. We're committed to doing that here at COP29, and we're very much looking forward to the opportunity to do that together in hosting COP31 in 2026. We're pleased to be partnering with the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat and New Zealand to support the Pacific Political Climate Champions Program. And it's an honour for me to be here to introduce an event like this that provides an opportunity to hear directly from Pacific champions and to hear about the region's priorities when it comes to climate change. As I said, we hope that COP31 will be a unique experience, a unique opportunity to draw global attention to the region's unique challenges, to accelerate global action and to highlight net zero economic opportunities and to raise First Nations voices. That's what we share. Australia and the Pacific, we share the fact that we have the stewardship of the blue Pacific continent. We share the fact that our richest heritage, our most precious heritage, is our First Nations heritage. Having said that, I'll keep my remarks short. I'll hand back to the man of the moment, to Zarak, to introduce the people who really are the stars of the show tonight, the Pacific Climate champions on the panel so we can hear about the outcomes that they want from COP29 and beyond. But again, nice to meet you, privileged to be here, and enjoy COP29.
Thank you very much, Assistant Minister Josh Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, honourable ministers, as the Assistant Minister had mentioned, it's my honour to introduce you very briefly to our 4 political champions who will be taking the floor this afternoon. The first is Honourable Fikita Utekamanu. She is representing our climate finance champion, the Honourable Prime Minister of Tonga, Prime Minister Sovaleni, who unfortunately could not be with us this afternoon. Honourable Utekamanu is the Minister for Climate Change for the government of Tonga. Second, we also have Honourable Mona Ainiu. She is the Minister for Natural Resources for the government of Niue, and she is our political champion for gender and social inclusion. We also have Honourable Biman Prasad. Honourable Biman Prasad is the Deputy Prime Minister of Fiji and also the Minister for Finance, and he is our Pacific Climate Champion for the Climate Oceans Nexus. And lastly but not least, we have Honourable Cedric Schuster, who is the Minister for Natural Resources and Environment for the government of Samoa, and he is our Pacific Climate Champion for mitigation. Esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, if I could humbly request our Pacific Climate Champions to please take your respective positions on the stage, and then we can begin with the round of questions. Yes, it's okay. Before we begin, I'd also like to recognize 2 other dignitaries who are with us, and many more, I'm sure. We will have the Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum, Baron Wanga, and we also have the Pacific Oceans Commissioner, Dr. Philemon Mononi, as well. I'm sure they will add to the discussions this afternoon. So without further ado, if I can perhaps begin with our first speaker, Honourable Fikita Utekamanu from Tonga. Honourable Minister, the question that we have for you this afternoon is a very important one, particularly noting that many of us have attended multiple COPs. We've been to many of these events before. We always strive, we always ask for change, we ask for developments that are beneficial to our Pacific. From your perspective, Honourable Minister, what is the number 1 priority that you'd like to see achieved at this year's COP29? Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Moderator. I would want to pay my respects to the Deputy Prime Minister of Fiji, Honourable Ministers, the Secretary General of the Forum Secretariat, members of Parliament, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I also want to thank Australia for creating this platform to allow the voices of the Pacific to be heard and acknowledge Australia and New Zealand's support for funding the Pacific Political Climate Champions initiative, enabling the climate champions to participate in this COP. I think we all came here to Baku with the understanding and very high expectation that this is going to be the climate finance COP, with all eyes focused on the new collective quantified goal, or now commonly referred to as NCQG. Of course, I understand that, that money is important and the need for implementing real, tangible climate action. With so many elements and agenda items up for negotiations, it's hard to say that there must be one thing that it is a priority, given that everything is interconnected. But let us not lose sight of the real cause of climate change. We must keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal alive. Our survival and our existence cannot be negotiated, and in the context of climate finance, NCQG is the key to keeping the 1.5 alive. The new goal must be aligned to the 1.5 degree goal. Conversely, the financing goal must reference the 1.5 degree pathways and include clear timeframes. Let me also stress that whatever figure or quantum we settle on, the outcomes from this COP, and in particular the NCQG outcomes must also be strong on the qualitative aspects of the goal. And by qualitative, we mean that the NCQG must deliver accessible, simplified, new, predictable, additional, and grant-based finance to meet the needs of the small island developing states. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for those comments. We'll move to our next speaker, the Honourable Minister from Niue, Honourable Ainu. Honourable Ainu, the thematic area that you are the champion for, which is gender equality and social inclusion, is a relatively new area and sometimes often misunderstood as well, but very important in the sense that it looks after some of the most vulnerable populations that we have back in the Pacific region. So I'd like to ask you the same question in terms of what your number one priority would be in terms of what you'd like to see achieved at this particular COP. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Zarek, and to all protocols observed. I don't want to hold on with the time, but as a political champion for gender, this is something that is very close to my heart, obviously, first as a female, but also as a mother. But as highlighted by Honourable Minister from Tonga, all of the priorities are interconnected. For me as the champion for Jessie, it is important to fully reflect on the existential impacts of climate change and to continue to place our people and communities at the center of our discussions and actions. Gender equality and social inclusion is a key issue and enabler of climate action. As emphasized by our forum chair, we must keep the 1.5 degrees goal alive and align our efforts across priorities of this goal. Climate finance is essential to achieving this. At the conclusion of this COP, I would like to see a consensus on finance to support the work of our women and girls and people in all their diversities. For Jessie, this means ensuring simplified access modalities to climate finance, particularly for grassroots communities and women organizations. Everywhere and daily, we experience new forms of adversities from the climate, increasing heat, warmer seas, leading to less seafood, and droughts, impeding access to water and food. Our Pacific people and communities, especially our women and girls, children, persons with disabilities, and other marginalized groups are the most impacted. Yet, it is not their fault. They did not cause the plight of a changing climate system we live in. That is reality for us in the Pacific. We haven't done anything wrong, and we continue to come to COP to state the fact that our people have not done anything wrong to fully get impacted by climate change. But we will continue for our women, our girls, our boys, our men, because gender is not just about us women. When I arrive back home, I want to say to my communities, I want to say, hey, this is what we achieved. This is my third COP that I've been to, and this is what we have achieved. Something realistic for us. You know, I would love to live here, to leave COP and go back home and say, these are the funds that we have achieved in our negotiations. Please, we need simplified processes to access these funds. It's no point in announcing these amazing numbers because it doesn't mean anything to us if it doesn't reach our people, if it doesn't reach our goals and have that effective impact of us traveling thousands of miles to come to COP each year. We might as well stay home and wait for our fate. Nature doesn't wait for anybody. That is reality for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think that's a very nice segue to the next thematic area of discussion, which is under Honourable Bimal Prasad, our Deputy Prime Minister for Fiji and the Minister of Finance. Just like we are advocate or avid protectors of our women, our girls, and our vulnerable populations, we're also custodians of our Moana, our Pacific, our Blue Pacific. And as you know, oceans is a very difficult issue at the COP level, noting that it's not part of the formal negotiating process. There is the Glasgow dialogue. There's other things that are happening on the periphery. All of us are hoping and praying that Australia can win the bid for COP31, where perhaps oceans could be much more part of the formal streams. And I know the Pacific is fully behind Australia on that. So to you, Professor Prasad, as a former student as well of yours, what would be your most important priority here at COP on the climate oceans nexus, but generally speaking in terms of the leadership that you'd like to show on these issues? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Zarak, and thank you, Honourable Ministers, Secretary General, Assistant Minister. We had a very good chat with your Environment Minister, Chris Bowen, and in Fiji, you know, we all resolved very clearly that we want Australia to host COP31, and we want it to be a Pacific COP, and we want to thank Australia for leading the contribution in the PRF, the Pacific Resilience Facility, which is now going to be based in Tonga. We had some discussion this morning. So there are two things about PRF which are very important. And we have always believed that in the Pacific, and this is something that we've seen not happening, and we are saying that development that is not locally led can be real development. And the same we want to extend to financing. So we see a lot of potential in PRF in its ability, if we have the right quantum, and thank you Australia for contributing handsomely there. We are still advocating for meeting the target. The Secretary General this morning talked about it, because that has the potential to take finance to the community, to the local level. Identify projects that will build resilience, that could provide the dignity and respect for communities ravaged by climate change disasters. COP29 for Pacific and for small island development states, whether it's PCIDs, whether we put it all as a group, as IOCs, the agreement on the new collective quantified goal is very critical. This COP, we can't leave Baku without having an agreement on NCQG, and we can't leave Baku without having an appropriate quantum. You know, that is because the time has run out for the Pacific Islands. The infrastructure deficit as a result of decades of natural disasters, impact of climate change, the deficit is huge. And none of the Pacific Island countries, including Fiji, have the fiscal space, have the ability to manage those deficit in the infrastructure, you know, without finance that is not only concessional, that includes grants, that includes special needs of the Pacific Island states, and that provides a window, as been stated before, of accessible and easier route to finance. With respect to oceans, I know, Zarak, there is a report, Ocean Climate Change Dialogue 2024 report. I'm not sure how this is going to be discussed at COP29, but as Oceans Champion, we would like to push that thematic area, and I could go in to details and give you a lot of ideas about what's happening with respect to oceans. But a lot of that will depend on how we are able to deal with the NCQG at this scope. You know, whether we talk about just transition, whether we talk about, you know, how we're going to deal with it. At the end of the day, if we can't get that agreement at this scope, everything else will fall off the rail. Because we've been talking about this for a while. And now is the time to get a sensible deal on that. I think we are also trying to, I have some notes here, we're trying to put ourselves as a co-facilitator, and I think Andrew Fiji has already made its request, you know, in writing, and we would like to get the support of our colleagues to be the co-facilitator with respect to looking after our oceans in the Pacific. There's a lot more that I can say, but I'll stop here. But let me just repeat this again. I think there's a lot of expectation from our leaders. Our leaders at the last forum meeting didn't mince their words. They were very clear. The Secretary General was very clear. And now the ball is in our court. And that's where I think I'll leave it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister, for those remarks. We'll now move across to our final speaker, but also the issue that Minister Schuster is speaking on is a very critical one. I think for all of us, they'll deal with civil society, with our young people, with our academia and non-state actors. They're very concerned about the fact that we have deviated from the 1.5-degree pathway, and the biggest emitting nations in the world are not stepping up when it comes to changing behavior, reducing emissions, facilitating a just transition, and supporting the mitigation work program and other issues. And so the same question is posed to you, Honorable Minister, noting that, you know, as I mentioned earlier, and I know you're a man of action, you like to walk the talk. What would be your foremost priority and achievement when it comes to the area of mitigation as our Pacific climate champion? Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Ete matwai mua I whātulou ma whātalo whai pa ia malu a whia nei a whiafi. Honourable Josh Wilson, Assistant Minister for Climate Change and Energy for Australia. Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Ministers, high-level Pacific climate champions, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues. Greetings and malo soifua. First of all, I want to thank our host, Honourable Josh Wilson, for convening this high-level panel event to elevate the role of Pacific climate champions. It's an opportunity to bolster our united stance in our fight for our survival and a promising future for the world, and hopefully hosting COP31 for Australia and the Pacific. But to be clear, we are not fighting for the Pacific or SIDS. We are fighting for a tomorrow for everyone, a basic human right that cannot be negotiated or compromised. Climate change is a planetary crisis and an existential one for SIDS, specifically given that we are in the forefront of climate change impacts. As a political champion for mitigation, I speak today on behalf of Pacific Island SIDS, where the difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees is quite literally a matter for survival. The COP29 package must keep 1.5 within reach. This is imperative that must be achieved. We stand at a critical juncture where the action of major emitters carry unprecedented weight. The stark reality is that without the immediate and decisive actions, our global efforts will fall short. while smaller nations demonstrate commitment through their NDCs, the scale of emissions from larger economies demand their leadership in this crucial transition. The mitigation work program represents our only explicit mitigation-focused agenda item, and it must deliver substantial outcomes, not just procedural ones. We cannot afford another year of process without progress. The science demands action now, and we need to see a clear timeline for phasing out all fossil fuels, immediate elimination of fossil fuel subsidies, tripling global renewable energy capacity by 2030, doubling energy efficiency improvements, halting new investments in fossil fuel infrastructure. We recognize these are challenging targets, but they are absolutely necessary for a just, fair, and equitable transition. It needs to be noted that we remain constructive partners in these negotiations, but we will not compromise on what science tells us is needed to secure our survival. The decision we make at COP29 must reflect this reality. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Ministers. I must thank all of our panelists for their discipline in terms of remaining on message, but also in terms of the timing. I think we're doing very well for time. We now move to the second half of the program, and I have one final set of questions that I'd like to pose to our Honourable Ministers. So, Honourable Ministers, as you know, the Bull Pacific region is one of the most challenging regions to do business, to work in, particularly because of how geographically spread out our countries are. We have challenges in terms of economies of scale and various other impediments that we encounter. So my question to Honourable Otekamanu firstly is, what does regionalism or a collective approach offer to the Pacific leadership when it comes to taking climate action? Over to you, Minister.
Thank you. Firstly, before I just respond directly to the question on how regionalism offers to Pacific leadership on climate action, I think it's important to note that regionalism was birthed in the Pacific over 77 years ago. So we've had 77 years of experience of working together on common issues in the Pacific region, and we have come to appreciate the impact as well as the benefits of working together as a group. And as we started with SPC, and then it grew to the forum and many other crop agencies as the need arose, and it's now we have focused the work of our regional organization and our political grouping on this very important issue of climate change, because we have all agreed, and I identified our group to be the most vulnerable, to be most impacted, to be the number one security issue for our islands, and impacting on not only economic but also on political and cultural and traditional knowledge. So I think that what benefits it offers to the Pacific leadership on climate action includes, firstly, the collaborative frameworks, specifically articulating common priority areas and issues. And so regionalism fosters collaboration among specific nations, facilitating the sharing of resources, knowledge, and best practices for addressing climate change. And the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent is the best example right now in its implementation plan. And through the strategy, we will ensure we are resilient and future ready by being able to anticipate, prepare for, and respond to hazardous climate events, geopolitical and security trends, and other unanticipated shocks. Secondly, it offers the opportunity for us to speak as a unified voice. Regionalism provides a platform for the Pacific nations to present a united front in international negotiations, amplifying our voices in global climate discussions and advocating for our unique needs and challenges. At a global level, as a small island developing state, it would be difficult for one voice to be heard because basically it's a numbers game. But when we have group positions, a group is not only noticed but also respected in the global arena. And then in terms of resource mobilization, regional initiatives can help in mobilizing financial resources and technical support from international partners, enhancing the capacity of Pacific nations to implement climate action strategies. And the Pacific Resilience Facility is the best example of this in action. Also, in terms of cultural and local knowledge integration, regionalism encourages the incorporation of indigenous traditional knowledge and local practices into climate solutions, ensuring that strategies are culturally relevant and effective. In terms of policy coherence, it promotes coherence in climate policies across the region, helping to align efforts and reduce duplication, which can enhance the effectiveness of climate action initiative. In terms of resilience building, by working together, regionally, Pacific nations can develop comprehensive approaches to building resilience against climate impacts, sharing experiences and strategies that have been proven successful in similar contexts. And the framework for resilience development in the Pacific was a first in integrating climate and disaster risks. And more recently, the regional framework for climate mobility also demonstrates the benefits of regionalism and regional action. So overall, regionalism does strengthen the collective capacity of the Pacific leadership to tackle climate challenges more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for those detailed remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we move across now to our next speaker, Honourable Minister Ainu once again. Minister Ainu is our most experienced Pacific climate champion at this stage. She's been a Pacific storyteller as a former communicator and a broadcaster. I think she'll add a very unique perspective in terms of responding to this particular question. So, Minister, the same question goes to you, ma'am. From your perspective, why do you believe the regional approach or the collective approach is important when it comes to Pacific leadership on climate action? Over to you.
Thank you, Zarek. That was a very generous introduction to the next question. I hope it's reflected in the DSA from PIPS. Sorry. Well, I support also the sentiments expressed by Honourable Minister Pekita. As the custodians of nearly 20% of the Earth's surface, the Pacific is at the front line of the adverse impacts of climate change, and we know that. We continue to talk about it. As our forum chair reminds us, regionalism strengthens the collective capacity of Pacific leadership to tackle climate change more effectively. As one blue Pacific continent, we're deeply committed to working together as a region, but also to complement our national interests. We work together to engage with our partners from a position of strength, unity, and solidarity on matters of collective interest. This commitment is embedded in the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. Our Pacific leaders have been very clear that the future of our islands cannot be left to chance. We know that climate change and disasters have a disproportionate impact on women and girls in all their diversities, particularly those who have disabilities and those living in rural areas, remote and maritime areas. This is a commitment leaders have made in revitalizing the Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration. Our women, our youth, our children, persons with disabilities, and indigenous communities are our greatest assets. We must ensure their access to resources to amplify their voices and agents of change. We need to harness their knowledge, experiences, and talents in contributing as active participants in the fight against the climate crisis. You know, for us anyway, I want to put a plug out. You know, we continue to find innovative ways, solutions for our own, to make sure that we're sustainable, make sure that our people are resilient to the climate impacts. You know, for Niue, we came up with a world-winning financial solution, and that is looking at our ocean space, putting a value and monetizing our ocean space, and making sure that we have a financial instrument to accommodate the monetization of that space. I know winning a Conservation International Award is great. I hope there are figures that are coming, so whoever it is that's in that space, this is what we need, because we try our best, and it's not because we're coming here to talk. We try our best at home, homegrown initiatives that people will have confidence, especially the communities, because it's very, very difficult to get the buy-in. But it's not just for Niue. This is for the Pacific. This is for our Pacific region. When we talk about the 20% of the Earth space being the Pacific region, to put it into perspective, 60% of the world tuna come from the Pacific region. 60%. How does that measure? How do we value that? Because there are countries who extract from the region and put a huge value on it. But what about us? So when we talk about, hey, come up with a solution to make sure that the ocean, you know, it's not warming up, it's very, very difficult for us to find ways. And these are some of the things that we have to come up. And we encourage, and I know all of us in the Pacific are doing our part to make sure that these solutions are practical, they're workable, they can benefit our own people. Because if we, like I said, if we wait, you know, to chance, I don't know. I don't want to come back to COP next year, if I'm ever coming back to COP, and sing the same song. I think it gets old after a while. And if we're not going to go back home, and I come all this way and go back empty-handed, that's not good for my people. But I hope, and I really, before I end, I extend and convey my deepest appreciation to Australia, Minister, for hosting this event. I know I have also called Australia, and I hope that COP31, and I know it will, in my heart it will, COP31 will come to Australia and the Pacific, so we are able to showcase what is happening in the Pacific, because we travel all this way. I have one island. I can't escape anywhere else. So I have to make sure that I highlight these challenges when people come from these parts of the world to see the impacts, the challenges. And thank you, Australia. Make sure that some of the activities, when COP31 does get to Australia, is taken to the Pacific Island. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Ainu. Ladies and gentlemen, as a former trade negotiator, one of the earliest lessons that we learn is that if you're not on the negotiating table, then you're on the menu. And so we know that many of our Pacific delegations, including Fiji, has faced a lot of heat in terms of why are we here on the other side of the world, traveling from so far away. Why was it important for Fiji, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister, to stand alongside your Pacific brothers and sisters when it comes to the COP negotiating process? Why is it important for you when it comes to regionalism and collective action in terms of showing leadership on climate issues. So over to you, Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Zarak. I thought this is the best question that you've asked, and that's about regionalism, my favorite. And I share everything that both honorable ministers have said about the benefits of regionalism, the possibilities of solving, problems at a regional level. And we've had a lot of unity over the last so many decades, particularly in terms of dealing with issues that emanate from outside the region. We have had one voice on a lot of issues internationally, but I think it's time that we as a region look at where regionalism is. And my take on regionalism is this: the time has come now for a much more deeper, meaningful regional integration. Whether you look at it from the geopolitical point of view, geo-economic point of view, and there are fractures within the region as a result of geopolitics, as a result of geoeconomics. So what we now need to advocate, and I've done that, and I think when I talk about regionalism, I talk about regionalism with Australia and New Zealand, a much more deeper, meaningful regional integration with Australia and New Zealand. I talked about visa-free Pacific last year at the Australasian Aid Conference. And I know my friend, the Honorable Prime Minister from Samoa, and our own Prime Minister from Fiji, Honorable Sitiveni Rambuka, have lent their voice on this whole idea of a much more deeper, meaningful regional integration. Because a lot of the issues, whether it's climate change, whether it's correspondent banking relationship now that we are dealing with, whether it's accessing, climate finance, whether it's looking at how communities are dealing with some of these issues. The difficulty that we have now is because we are not integrated. We talk about working together. We do talk about together sometimes. We have one voice. But when it comes to action related to things being done at a regional level, we have a lot of barriers. Investment flows, for example, super funds, labor mobility within the Pacific. We're talking about labor mobility to Australia, New Zealand from the Pacific. What about labor mobility within the region? A lot of the infrastructure deficit. We also have to now look at regionalism in another sense. So, for example, if we are building a big infrastructure, a port facility in Samoa, I would see that not as a Samoan facility alone for the benefit of Samoans, but that facility is going to be a regional public infrastructure, because if we are integrated, if we are pursuing trade, so anything that we build in any of the Pacific Island countries, whether we build a hospital, whether we build a road, ports, water infrastructure, first of all, they all have to be climate resilient. Anything that we build now has to be climate resilient. But also, it is something that benefits all the Pacific Island countries, because we trade with each other, we send our people, and so a deeper, more meaningful regional integration is appropriate, and the time has come now for our leaders and all of us with Australia and New Zealand to begin talking about it and seriously taking action, because that will help us to resolve and deal with one of the most difficult problems, and that's the impact of climate change in the Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Prime Minister. We'll move to our last speaker, but not the least, Honorable Cedric Schuster. I'm very much looking forward to hearing from Minister Schuster on this topic because he's in a very unique situation. He's been a lifelong environmentalist, but he's also a former CSO representative with the World Wildlife Fund for Nature. And so not many people get to emulate the journey that our Honorable Minister has made from the green zone to a decision maker in the blue zone. So Minister Schuster, the same question for you. Why do you think it's important for regional collective action and regionalism when it comes to Pacific leadership on climate action? Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Being the last speaker can be a good or a bad part. So the good part is I agree with what everyone has said, and I can finish there. The hard part is now trying to figure something out to make me sound like I know something. So, regionalism. It's not 77 years, as my honorable colleague has said, for the Pacific. We actually navigated and lived in the Pacific for over 3,000 years. So regionalism and survival of the Pacific Islands was based from that. That's how regionalism, our culture, our livelihood, our everything was built on these, relying on each other, learning from each of the small islands. So it has been a long and how we existed before the Europeans came and saw our islands, and we'd already developed a culture on how to address climate change, how to live within nature first, how to interact with our neighbors, how to share the fishing knowledge on when the tuna migrates. These are all issues that we've lived with. Now, the challenge is as the Pacific Islands became independent, these new world order of countries. And why it's important for us as the Pacific is because a small population, a small island like Niue, isn't able to do a lot of things to help its country. But collectively, with 22 island nations, we have 22 votes in the multilateralism of UN agencies. One country cannot amplify its voice, but together, and this has been the Pacific's voice for the last, is it 77 years since the UN is established and when the Pacific nations came into fruition. And that is how we've always addressed a lot of issues. It's helped us negotiate the fishing rights with the fisheries, the tuna migration that goes through the whole region. And collectively uniting the Pacific enable us to control and have a better management of our fisheries. Collectively and as a region, we are able to have a more bigger voice at the international negotiation in terms of the climate change. But also I want to say that regionalism doesn't get us to the answer. It's multilateralism. And this is why it's important collective for us as the Pacific to work with our other regional agencies like the AOSIS for the small island states, but also with Australia and New Zealand, our other partners, that support and work together, because together everyone needs to work to try and get us resolve the issue of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. I think you probably prepared very well, Honourable Minister, if you're saying that you didn't have a lot to say, but you did. I think a lot of meaningful words of action that you've articulated. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen and Honourable Ministers, we've now come to the close of our session this afternoon. Just by way of some very quick closing remarks before we let you go off to your next appointment, I think there's a number of very critical issues that our distinguished panelists have highlighted to all of us. I'd just like to pick up on 2 points before we finish off. The first is, as our ministers have mentioned, this is informally the Climate Finance COP. And I think from their presentations and from the respective discussions we've had, climate finance is not a singular issue. it impacts upon all the thematic areas of the COP negotiations, whether we're talking about gender equality or social inclusion, oceans, or we're talking about mitigation, adaptation. Climate finance is the lifeblood. You know, it is basically what moves a lot of our issues from talk into action. So I think our ministers have basically emphasized the point that whatever the outcome is from this particular COP, they need the issues or the eventual landing zone for climate finance to be accessible, it needs to be simplified, it needs to be grant-based, and it needs to be additional. And I think if we can, as advocates, as partners in this process, support our climate champions and each other in this process, I think that'll be a big win for all of us. And the second point that we'd just like to make is that, firstly, thank you very much to the Government of Australia for making available this particular avenue for us and for providing us this platform. I think it's very important. I don't think this is the end of the journey or the end of the story. As our ministers have mentioned, we all need to get together and support Australia's bid to host COP31. Please give a hand for that. Yes. I think for all of us that have attended multiple COPs, it's very difficult for us to travel to the other side of the world and have these issues discussed in foreign countries. I think it's high time that we bring these discussions and conversations, back into the Pacific region, back onto our turf. So I think, our ministers are basically requesting your support to please use your bilateral engagements, your multilateral engagements, and every avenue that is available to you to please carry this message so that we can run this home, not just for Australia, but for the Pacific. And so thank you very much to our panelists. Please give them a round of applause. If I can invite the Honourable Minister for Australia, Assistant Minister, please come to the stage. We'll take a photograph with the other panelists. Vinaka, thank you. Thank you so much, Minister. Appreciate it.